Commander Nari Park walked into the biggest meeting room she had ever seen. The walls were pure white and stretched up so high that she had to lean her head back to see the ceiling. Bright lights made everything glow like the inside of a pearl. She carried a small datapad in her left hand and kept her face calm even though her heart was beating fast. 12 different types of aliens sat around a massive circular table. Nari had studied them all, but seeing them in person was still strange. The Velkari looked like walking crystal sculptures with arms and legs made of clear rock that sparkled under the lights. They were twice as tall as humans, and their voices sounded like wind chimes when they talked. The Nethians floated above there, chairs like purple clouds with tiny lightning bolts dancing inside their bodies. They did not have mouths, so they spoke through small metal boxes that made their words sound like radio static. Near them sat the Karathi, who looked almost human, except their skin was bright blue, and they had 4 arms instead of 2. Other aliens filled the remaining seats. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like they were made of metal. All of them were staring at Nari as she walked to the center of the room where a small platform waited for her. Nari stepped onto the platform and looked around the circle. Most of the aliens were leaning back in their chairs. Some were whispering to each other. A few were looking at their own datapads instead of paying attention to her. She could tell they did not think this meeting was important. Behind her, Lieutenant Jae Sung Kim sat at a control desk. He was the best technology officer in the human fleet, and Nari trusted him completely. His job was to run the holographic displays that would show her presentation. He gave her a small nod to let her know everything was ready. The Velkari ambassador was the first to speak. His crystal body caught the light as he moved, and his voice filled the room like music. Commander Park, we have granted you this time to present your report. However, we must remind you that this council has more pressing matters to discuss today. Nari knew what he really meant. The aliens thought humans were not important enough for a long meeting. For 3 years, the human fleet had been fighting alongside the Galactic Alliance against an enemy called the Dominion. But the aliens always gave humans the easy jobs like carrying supplies or guarding empty space stations. Thank you for your time, honored delegates, Nari said in a clear voice. I will not waste it. She touched her datapad and the first holographic display appeared above the table. It showed the title of her presentation in large letters that glowed blue against the white room. The words read, Human Military Doctrine, Why We Fight Differently. A Nethian delegate made a sound like static electricity. Through his translation box, his words came out flat and emotionless. Commander, we have reviewed human combat records. Your species shows promise but lacks the discipline required for major military operations. Other aliens around the table nodded in agreement. Nari had expected this reaction. Every alien species in the Alliance had been fighting wars for thousands of years before humans even learned to fly between planets. They all thought they knew everything about battle tactics and strategy. With respect, Delegate, Nari replied, I believe our recent actions speak differently. The Karathi military advisor spoke up with all 4 of her arms crossed. Commander, human forces have participated in 17 major engagements over the past 3 years. In each case, you were assigned support roles because your tactics are unpredictable and often dangerous to your allies. Nari smiled just a little bit. Unpredictable, yes. Dangerous to allies, no. But I understand your concern. She touched her datapad again. Lieutenant Kim activated the holographic projector, and a 3-dimensional map appeared floating above the center of the table. It showed a solar system with 8 planets and thousands of small asteroids. Several alien delegates recognized it immediately. The Kepler system, said a delegate from the Thaxian Empire. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stones. The site of our most recent victory against the Dominion fleet. Nari nodded. Exactly. 17 months ago, this council assigned human forces to support your defense of this system. Our orders were very specific. The holographic display changed to show the battle formation that had been planned. Alien warships formed neat lines near the system's center, while human ships were spread out along the edges, far from the main fighting. It looked organized and safe, exactly the way the aliens like to fight. Your strategist calculated that we had a 73% chance of victory with this formation, Nari continued. Human forces were to provide supply runs and rescue operations while your main fleets engaged the enemy directly. A Velkari officer made a sound like breaking glass. The plan was sound. It utilized each species according to their strengths and experience levels. Nari could hear the insult hidden in those words. The aliens thought humans were only good for simple jobs because they were new to space warfare. She had heard similar comments many times over the past 3 years. The plan was indeed sound, Nari agreed. It followed all the standard rules of galactic military doctrine: careful positioning, clear command structure, and predictable tactics that had worked for your people for centuries. She paused and looked around the table. The aliens were starting to pay more attention now. Even the ones who had been looking at their data pads were watching the holographic display. There was just one problem, Nari said. The Dominion did not follow your rules. Lieutenant Kim changed the display to show what had actually happened during the battle. Instead of the neat formations from the original plan, the image showed chaos. Alien ships were scattered and broken. Emergency signals flashed red throughout the system. It looked like a disaster. 6 hours into the engagement, the Dominion fleet used a flanking maneuver that your computers had calculated as only 12% probable, Nari explained. Your main battle line began to collapse. The room was completely quiet now. Even the Nethians had stopped their constant electrical humming. All eyes were focused on the holographic battle scene playing out above the table. Nari touched her datapad one more time. This is when Admiral Tae-hyun Lee received your request for immediate assistance. This is also when he made what your tactical computers classified as the worst possible decision. The display showed human ships suddenly breaking away from their assigned positions. Instead of moving in organized groups, they scattered in all directions like startled birds. To the watching aliens, it looked like complete panic. Your officers assumed we were retreating in disorder, Nari said. They were wrong. Nari watched the alien delegates lean forward in their seats. The holographic display still showed human ships breaking formation and scattering across the Kepler system. To anyone watching, it looked like humans had panicked and run away when the fighting got serious. Let me show you what really happened, Nari said. She touched her datapad and the display rewound to the beginning of the battle. The Kepler system appeared again in perfect detail. 3 planets orbited a yellow sun, while thousands of asteroids drifted in a wide belt between the second and third worlds. The Dominion fleet had come out of hyperspace near the outer edge of the system. They moved in perfect formation like a school of metal fish swimming through space. The enemy brought 47 warships, Nari explained. Your intelligence. Reports said they would bring 30 at most. They also had 12 support vessels that your scouts had missed completely. Lieutenant Kim highlighted the Dominion ships in red while the Allied forces glowed blue and green. The alien fleet looked impressive with their large battleships arranged in neat rows. Each ship was 3 times bigger than the largest human vessel. Their weapons could destroy a human destroyer with a single shot. The Velkari ambassador made a sound like wind through crystal caves. Our formation was designed to maximize firepower while protecting our larger ships. It was the correct tactical choice. For a normal battle, yes, Nari agreed. But Admiral Lee noticed something your computers missed. The display zoomed in on the Dominion fleet. At first glance, they looked like they were flying in a standard attack formation. But Admiral Tae-hyun Lee had been fighting in space for 20 years before humans even met aliens. He knew how to read enemy movements better than any computer program. The enemy ships were not moving toward your main battle line, Nari continued. They were moving toward the asteroid belt. Your sensors showed this, but your tactical systems dismissed it as unimportant navigation data. A Karathi officer spoke, up with doubt in her voice. Commander, our analysis showed the asteroids posed no tactical significance. They were too small to hide large vessels and too scattered to provide effective cover. Nari smiled. That is exactly what Admiral Lee was counting on you to think. She touched her datapad again. The display showed a close-up view of Admiral Lee on the bridge of his flagship. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. His uniform was simple compared to the fancy clothes alien officers wore, but his presence commanded respect from every human who served under him. At hour 4 of the engagement, Admiral Lee sent a message to all human ship captains. Nari said, The message was transmitted on an open channel that your communication officers could monitor. Lieutenant Kim played a recording of Admiral Lee's voice. It sounded calm and professional, exactly what alien commanders expected from humans during a crisis. All human vessels, this is Admiral Lee. We are moving to secondary positions as planned. Maintain communication silence and execute individual ship protocols. Lee out. The alien delegates looked confused. The message sounded like a normal retreat order. Nothing special about it at all. Your officers heard this message and assumed we were pulling back to safer positions, Nari explained. But every human captain understood what Admiral Lee really meant. The display showed human ships beginning to move away from the main battle formation. But instead of heading toward the rear of the battle zone, they were spreading out in what looked like random directions. Some went toward the asteroid belt while others moved closer to the planets. A Nethian delegate made sounds like static electricity. His translation box crackled before producing words. Commander Park, this appeared to be a disorganized retreat. No tactical computer would recommend such scattered movement. Exactly, Nari said. Because no tactical computer thinks like a human. She changed the display to show Captain So Young Choi on the bridge of her heavy cruiser. Captain Choi was younger than Admiral Lee but just as experienced in combat. Her ship had fought in more battles than any other vessel in the human fleet. Captain Choi received Admiral Lee's message and immediately understood her real orders. Nari continued. She was to take her ship to grid reference 74 Alpha and wait for the enemy to make their move. The display showed Captain Choi's ship moving toward what looked like empty space near the third planet. To alien observers, it seemed like she was running away from the battle. But Captain Choi was actually moving to a position that Admiral Lee had calculated 3 days earlier. Meanwhile, Colonel Minho Park took his destroyer squadron into the asteroid belt, Nari said. Your sensors lost track of his ships because they were too small to distinguish from the space rocks around them. Colonel Park appeared on the display. He was a thin man with quick hands and eyes that always seemed to be looking for trouble. His destroyers were the fastest ships in the human fleet, and he used their speed like a weapon. Colonel Park's ships had been modified with special hull plating that made them almost invisible to Dominion sensors, Nari explained. While your main fleet engaged the enemy directly, he was moving into position for something your battle computers never considered possible. The alien delegates were paying complete attention now. Even the ones who had seemed bored earlier were leaning forward to see the holographic display better. They were beginning to understand that the human retreat had not been what it appeared. At the same time, Commander Yujin Song was moving her carrier group toward what your tactical systems identified as a useless position behind the system's second moon, Nari continued. Commander Song appeared on the display. She was a small woman with a voice that could cut through the noise of a battle like a laser beam. Her fighters were known throughout the human fleet for their ability to appear where enemies least expected them. Commander Song's fighters had been practicing a maneuver that no alien military had ever attempted, Nari said. Something we call a gravity slingshot attack. The display showed fighter squadrons launching from Commander Song's carriers, but instead of flying directly toward the enemy, they were heading toward the second moon at maximum speed. Your observers assumed the fighters were retreating to regroup, Nari explained. They did not realize the fighters were using the moon's gravity to accelerate to speeds that should have been impossible for such small craft. Nari paused and looked around the table. The alien delegates were completely silent now. They were starting to understand that everything they had seen during the Kepler battle had been carefully planned by human commanders who thought about warfare in ways their computers could not predict. This brings us to hour 6 of the engagement, Nari said. The moment when the Dominion fleet made their real attack and your main battle line began to fail. Nari touched her datapad, and the holographic display changed to show the battle at its most critical moment. The neat formations of alien warships were breaking apart as the Dominion fleet attacked from an unexpected direction. Hour 6. Nari said. This is when everything your computers predicted went wrong. The display showed the Dominion fleet suddenly splitting into 3 groups. The largest group continued toward the alien battle line as expected, but 2 smaller groups peeled off and headed in different directions. One went high above the system plane while the other dove below it. "A three-pronged attack," said the Thaxian delegate in his grinding voice. "Our computers calculated only a 15% probability of such a maneuver." Nari nodded. "Your battle systems were designed to fight enemies who think like you do. Careful, organized, predictable. The Dominion had studied your tactics for months and knew exactly how to break them. The holographic battle showed Dominion ships hitting the alien fleet from above and below, while their main force attacked head-on. The alien formation that had looked so strong before was now caught in a deadly trap. Ships began taking heavy damage as enemy fire came from 3 directions at once. Your flagship sent out emergency signals," Nari continued. "All ships were ordered to reform defensive positions and call for immediate support from human forces." Lieutenant Kim played recordings of the desperate alien communications. Voices filled with fear and confusion crackled through the speakers. Ship captains reported hull breaches and weapon failures. Medical teams called for evacuation support. The careful alien battle plan was falling apart. Admiral Lee received 17 separate requests for assistance in the space of 4 minutes, Nari said. "Your commanders wanted human ships to move into the battle zone and help hold the line against Dominion attacks. The display showed human ships still scattered across the system. To the alien commanders, it looked like the humans were too far away to provide any meaningful help. Some alien officers began to think the battle was lost." "This is when Admiral Lee made his decision," Nari said. "Instead of ordering human ships to reinforce your battle line, he transmitted a single word on all human frequencies." She paused and looked around the table. Every alien delegate was watching her with complete attention. "Execute," Nari said simply. The holographic display suddenly came alive with movement. Human ships that had seemed scattered and disorganized began moving with purpose and speed that shocked the watching aliens. Captain Choi's cruiser emerged from behind the third planet and opened fire on Dominion ships from their unprotected rear. Captain Choi had been waiting in position for 2 hours, Nari explained. While your main fleet held the enemy's attention, she moved to attack their supply ships and command vessels. The display showed Captain Choi's weapons tearing into lightly armored Dominion support craft. These ships carried ammunition, fuel, and communication equipment for the main battle fleet. Without them, the Dominion attack would collapse within hours. At the same time, Colonel Park's destroyers emerged from the asteroid belt, Nari continued. The small human ships appeared like ghosts among the space rocks. They had been hiding there since the battle began, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Their special hull plating had made them invisible to enemy sensors. Colonel Park's ships attacked the Dominion fleet from the side while they were focused on your main battle line, Nari said. Destroyers are too small to fight battleships in direct combat, but they are perfect for hit-and-run attacks on larger ships that cannot turn fast enough to target them. The display showed human destroyers darting between massive Dominion battleships like tiny fish attacking whales. They fired torpedoes at engine sections and weapon ports before disappearing back into the asteroid field. The Dominion commanders were confused, Nari explained. They had planned their attack based on fighting your organized fleet formations. They were not prepared for enemies who appeared from empty space and vanished again before they could respond. A Velkari officer made a sound like cracking ice. Commander, these tactics violate several principles of accepted space combat doctrine. Such scattered attacks should not be effective against a coordinated fleet. Nari smiled. That is exactly what the Dominion commanders thought too. The holographic display moved to show Commander Song's fighters approaching the second moon at incredible speed. They had been using the moon's gravity to accelerate beyond their normal maximum velocity. Commander Song's pilots executed a maneuver that alien flight computers said was impossible, Nari said. They used gravity assist to build up speed, then shut off their engines and coasted in complete silence toward the Dominion fleet. The tiny fighters were moving so fast they appeared as blurs on the display. Because their engines were off, they gave off no heat signature and made no radio emissions. To enemy sensors, they simply did not exist. The fighters reached attack position just as the Dominion fleet was dealing with Colonel Park's destroyer attacks, Nari continued. Enemy point defense systems were focused on the wrong targets. The display showed hundreds of human fighters, suddenly appearing in the middle of the Dominion formation. They had approached in complete silence and struck without warning. Their small weapons could not destroy battleships, but they could disable sensor arrays and communication equipment. In the space of 12 minutes, the Dominion fleet lost contact with their command ship. Their supply vessels were destroyed or damaged, and their sensors were blinded by fighter attacks, Nari said. They went from having tactical superiority to fighting blind. The alien delegates sat in stunned silence as the holographic battle played out. The Dominion fleet that had seemed so threatening was now stumbling around the system like a wounded animal. Their careful three-pronged attack had become a disaster. Your main battle line was able to reform and push forward, Nari continued. With human forces attacking from multiple directions, the Dominion commanders lost control of the battle. The display showed alien ships advancing on enemies who could no longer coordinate their defense. Dominion vessels began retreating toward the edge of the system, but human ships were already moving to cut off their escape routes. The battle ended with complete Allied victory, Nari said. 41 Dominion ships destroyed or captured. Only 6 escaped to hyperspace. Your losses were minimal. She paused and looked around the table again. The alien delegates were staring at the holographic display with new understanding. They had seen the battle happen, but they had not understood what they were seeing until now. After the engagement, your tactical computers analyzed human ship movements, Nari continued. They concluded that we had been lucky, that our scattered attacks succeeded by chance rather than planning. The Karathi military advisor spoke up with all 4 arms crossed. The computer analysis was thorough. It showed that human tactics had only a 38% probability of success. Nari nodded. That is correct. If the battle had been fought as a computer simulation with both sides following standard tactical doctrine, we would have lost. She touched her datapad one more time. But there was one thing your computers could not calculate. A new image appeared on the holographic display. It showed Admiral Lee standing in a briefing room 3 days before the battle began. Around him sat every human ship captain who would participate in the fight. Admiral Lee did not plan for the battle your computers expected, Nari said. He planned for the battle he knew the Dominion would actually fight. Nari was about to advance to her 3rd slide when the entire station shook. The white walls of the meeting chamber flickered as emergency lights came on throughout the room. A deep vibration ran through the floor that made several alien delegates grab their chairs for balance. Warning, said an automated voice that echoed from speakers in the ceiling. Incoming hostile fleet detected. All personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The holographic display above the table flickered and went dark as Lieutenant Kim's control systems switched to emergency power. Red warning lights bathed the chamber in an eerie glow that made the crystal bodies of the Velkari delegates look like they were filled with blood. Through the massive viewing window that made up one wall of the chamber, space, suddenly, filled with new stars. But these were not real stars. They were the bright points of light that marked ships dropping out of hyperspace. Dozens of them appeared in perfect formation, and they were all heading directly toward the station. Dominion dreadnoughts, whispered a Nethian delegate through his translation box. The static in his voice made him sound even more frightened than usual. Nari looked out the window and counted the enemy ships. 27 heavy battleships accompanied by twice as many smaller vessels. It was the largest Dominion fleet anyone had seen in over a year of fighting. They had appeared in what was supposed to be the most secure sector of Council space. The alien delegates erupted into panic. Karathi officers shouted orders into their communication devices, while Velkari representatives made sounds like breaking glass. The Thaxian military advisor was already moving toward the exit with his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. How did they get past our sensor networks? Demanded the Velkari ambassador. His crystal body was flashing with lights that showed his distress. This system has 3 separate early warning stations. Nari remained calm while chaos filled the chamber. Around her, she touched her communication device and spoke in a clear voice that cut through the noise. Lieutenant Kim, secure all presentation data and prepare for combat operations. Lieutenant Kim was already moving. His fingers flew over his control panel as he saved their files and switched his systems to military channels. "Done, Commander. All data secured." Commander Park called out a Karathi delegate with fear in her voice. "We need to evacuate the station immediately. Our defense fleet cannot handle a force that size." Before Nari could respond, her communication device crackled with an incoming message. The voice that came through was calm and professional, exactly what she had expected to hear. "Commander Park, this is Admiral Lee. Human fleet units are moving to intercept the enemy force. Request permission to implement Contingency Plan 7. Nari felt a small smile cross her face. Admiral Lee was using the same tone he had used during the Kepler battle. Calm, confident, and completely unworried about the fact that enemy ships outnumbered his fleet by more than 2-1. "Permission granted, Admiral," Nari replied. "Execute at your discretion." The Velkari ambassador turned to stare at her with his crystal face reflecting the red emergency lights. "Commander, what is Contingency Plan 7? How can your admiral be so confident when facing such overwhelming numbers?" Nari walked to the viewing window and looked out at the approaching Dominion fleet. The enemy ships were moving in perfect formation, just like their computers had taught them. Careful, organized, and completely predictable. "Contingency Plan 7 is what we call Adaptive Response Protocol," Nari said. "It means we fight the battle in front of us instead of the battle our computers think we should fight." Lieutenant Kim's control panel lit up with new information as human ships throughout the system began moving. On his screens, Nari could see friendly contacts accelerating toward the Dominion fleet from a dozen different directions. "Commander," said a Nethian delegate through his crackling translation box, "your ships appear to be attacking without coordination. They are not maintaining formation or following standard engagement protocols." Nari nodded. "That is correct. Standard engagement protocols assume your enemy will also follow standard tactics. The Dominion stopped doing that months ago." Through the viewing window, she could see the first explosions beginning as human and Dominion ships opened fire on each other. But something was wrong with what the aliens were seeing. The human ships were not where they were supposed to be. "Lieutenant Kim, can you restore the tactical display?" Nari asked. Lieutenant Kim worked quickly to bring his holographic projector back online. Within seconds, a three-dimensional map of the local space appeared above the chamber table. It showed the positions of every ship in the system, both friendly and hostile. The alien delegates stared at the display in confusion. According to their sensors, human ships should have been caught off guard by the surprise attack. They should have been scrambling to respond from defensive positions around the station. Instead, the human fleet was already in perfect position to engage the enemy from multiple angles. Ships that should have been hours away were firing on Dominion vessels from ideal attack positions. It looked like the humans had known about the attack before it happened. "This is impossible," said the Thaxian military advisor in his grinding voice. "Your ships could not have reached those positions unless they began moving hours ago." Nari turned away from the viewing window to face the alien delegates. The red emergency lights made her expression hard to read, but her voice was perfectly clear. "Admiral Lee received intelligence about this attack 3 days ago," she said. "Sergeant Da Yun-Yun's reconnaissance team intercepted Dominion communications indicating they were massing a fleet for a major strike." Lieutenant Kim highlighted several human ships on the tactical display. "These vessels have been moving into position since yesterday," he said, while maintaining the appearance of routine patrol operations. The holographic display showed human ship movements over the past 72 hours. What had looked like normal traffic patterns was actually a carefully coordinated deployment. Every human vessel in the system had been quietly moving to predetermined positions. "You mean your forces have been preparing for this specific attack while we were sitting in meetings?" asked a Karathi officer with disbelief in her voice. Nari nodded. "The presentation I was giving you about the Kepler battle was not just a historical report. It was a demonstration of human tactical doctrine in action. We do not just react to enemy attacks. We anticipate them." The tactical display updated to show the current battle situation. Human ships were engaging Dominion forces from 6 different directions simultaneously. The enemy fleet that had looked so threatening was already taking heavy damage from attacks they had not expected. Colonel Minho Park's destroyer squadron was hiding in the debris field from last month's asteroid mining operation, Nari explained. Captain So Young Choi's battle group has been stationed behind the fourth moon since yesterday morning. More explosions lit up the space outside the viewing window as human attacks found their targets. The Dominion fleet was trying to maintain formation, but their careful plans were falling apart just like they had at Kepler. Commander Song's fighters launched from concealed positions an hour ago. Nari continued. They have been coasting, in sensor shadow, waiting for the enemy to arrive. A Velkari delegate made sounds like wind through broken crystal. How could you know exactly when and where the Dominion would attack? Their operational security is considered excellent, Nari touched her communication device again. Sergeant Yoon, please report to the delegates on your intelligence findings. A new voice came through the speakers. It belonged to a young woman who sounded tired but professional. This is Sergeant Da Yoon, Reconnaissance Division. 3 days ago, my team intercepted communications from a Dominion command ship. They were coordinating with sleeper agents inside council space. The alien delegates looked at each other with growing alarm. Sleeper agents meant the Dominion had been planning this attack for weeks or months, not days. The intercepted messages revealed the exact time and location of the planned attack. Sergeant Yoon continued. Admiral Lee immediately began positioning human forces to respond. Nari looked around the chamber at the shocked faces of the alien delegates. This attack was not a surprise to us. It was an opportunity to demonstrate something your tactical computers still do not understand. She gestured toward the tactical display where the battle was clearly turning in favor of the human fleet. Dominion ships were breaking formation and trying to retreat, but human vessels were already moving to cut off their escape routes. We do not just adapt to enemy tactics, Nari said. We make the enemy adapt to ours. The battle outside the station viewing window was unlike anything the alien delegates had ever seen. Human ships moved through space with a fluid grace that made their attacks look almost like a dance. They appeared from impossible angles, struck hard, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Nari watched Admiral Lee coordinate the defense from his flagship bridge. His image appeared on Lieutenant Kim's restored communication screen, and his voice filled the chamber with calm confidence. Phoenix Squadron, you are clear for attack pattern Delta, Admiral Lee said. Colonel Park, take your destroyers through the debris field and hit their left flank. Commander Song, I want your fighters to disable their command ship's communication array. The alien delegates listened with amazement as human officers responded immediately to each order. There was no hesitation, no requests for clarification, and no argument about tactics. Each captain knew exactly what to do, and began doing it within seconds. How do they coordinate so effectively without detailed battle plans? Asked the Velkari ambassador. His crystal body was no longer flashing with panic lights, but with fascination. Nari gestured toward the tactical display where human ships were moving in patterns that looked random but were clearly planned. Human military doctrine is built around individual initiative within overall objectives. Each captain is trained to think independently while working toward the same goal. Captain So Young Choi's voice came through the communication system as her battle group engaged 3 Dominion cruisers at once. Admiral, this is Captain Choi. Enemy vessels are trying to break through our perimeter near Grid 7 Alpha. Requesting permission to pursue. Negative, Captain, Admiral Lee replied immediately. Let them run. Colonel Park will intercept them at Grid 9 Charlie. You focus on the battleships. The tactical display showed exactly what Admiral Lee meant. Colonel Park's destroyers were already moving to a position where they could ambush the retreating Dominion cruisers. Captain Choi's heavier ships stayed focused on the main enemy battle line. Your admiral sees the entire battle at once, observed. A Karathi military officer with all 4 arms crossed in thought. He directs individual ships while maintaining awareness of the overall tactical situation. Nari nodded. Admiral Lee has been fighting space battles since before humans joined the galactic community. But more importantly, he understands that real combat is not like computer simulations. Enemies do not follow programs. Through the viewing window, they could see Colonel Park's destroyers emerging from a cloud of metal debris left over from asteroid mining operations. The small ships had been hiding there for hours, waiting for exactly this moment. They opened fire on the retreating Dominion cruisers from point-blank range. "Direct hits," reported Colonel Park over the communication system. "2 cruisers disabled, 1 destroyed. Enemy survivors are surrendering." At the same time, Commander Yu Jin-song's fighters were swarming around the massive Dominion command ship like angry insects around a giant. Their small weapons could not penetrate the battleship's heavy armor, but they were systematically destroying every sensor array and communication dish they could find. "Command ship is going blind," Commander Song reported. "They cannot coordinate with their other vessels. Estimate complete communication breakdown in 4 minutes." The Thaxian military advisor made sounds like grinding stone as he watched the battle unfold. "Your fighters are using the enemy ship's size against them. The battleship cannot target such small, fast-moving opponents." "Exactly," Nari said. "Dominion doctrine assumes that bigger weapons always beat smaller ones. They build massive ships with powerful guns but poor point defense systems." The tactical display showed the truth of her words. Dominion battleships were designed to fight other large warships in direct confrontations. They had never been built to handle swarms of tiny fighters that could dart between their weapon emplacements. Meanwhile, General Hyun-woo Nam's Marines are preparing for boarding operations, Nari continued. A new voice joined the communication channel. It belonged to a man who sounded like he was looking forward to a fight. "Admiral, this is General Nam. My teams are ready to take those damaged cruisers. We have assault shuttles standing by." "Proceed, General," Admiral Lee replied. "Capture their officers if possible. We need intelligence about their next planned operations." The alien delegates watched in fascination as small human shuttles launched from hidden positions and headed toward the disabled Dominion vessels. The shuttles were heavily armored and moved with the same unpredictable patterns as the larger warships. "Your Marines board enemy ships during active combat?" asked a Nethian delegate through his static-filled translation box. "Such operations are considered too dangerous to attempt until after the battle ends." Nari smiled. "General Nam's Marines have been training for combat boarding operations since the war began. They specialize in taking control of enemy vessels, while the crews are still trying to fight." The holographic tactical display updated to show human Marines cutting through the hull of a Dominion cruiser. Within minutes, they had secured the ship's bridge and engine room. The enemy vessel that had been trying to retreat was now under human control. "Cruiser secure," reported General Nam. "We have captured the ship's captain and his command staff. Intelligence teams are already downloading their computer systems." Admiral Lee's voice carried satisfaction as he acknowledged the report. "Well done, General. Signal the other boarding teams to proceed with their operations." More human assault shuttles appeared on the tactical display, heading toward damaged Dominion ships. Instead of simply destroying their enemies, the humans were capturing them along with their crews and equipment. "You fight to gain information as well as territory," observed the Karathi military advisor. "Each captured ship teaches you more about enemy tactics and technology." Nari nodded. "Every battle is also an intelligence-gathering operation. We learn from our enemies even while we defeat them." The tide of battle was clearly turning in humanity's favor. The Dominion fleet that had seemed so threatening was now scattered across the system. Some ships were destroyed, others were captured, and the rest were trying desperately to escape to hyperspace. Admiral Lee called Captain Choi over the communication system. "Enemy flagship is attempting to withdraw. Should we pursue?" Admiral Lee considered the question for a moment before responding. "Negative, Captain. Let them go. We have what we came for." The alien delegates looked confused by this decision. The Dominion flagship was damaged and could probably be captured or destroyed if human forces pursued it. "Why allow their command ship to escape?" asked the Velkari ambassador. "Surely capturing their fleet admiral would be a significant victory." Nari looked out the viewing window where the battered Dominion flagship was limping toward the edge of the system. Its hull was scarred by weapon impacts and several of its weapon turrets had been destroyed by fighter attacks. "Because Admiral Lee knows that flagship will return to Dominion space and report exactly what happened here," Nari said. "The enemy commanders will study this battle and try to develop new tactics to counter our strategies." She paused and smiled at the confused expressions on the alien faces around her. And when they do, Admiral Lee will be ready with tactics they have not seen yet. The battle was effectively over. 15 Dominion ships had been destroyed or captured, while only 3 human vessels had taken significant damage. The enemy force that should have been able to destroy the station had been crushed in less than 2 hours. "Commander Park," said Admiral Lee over the communication system. "All hostile contacts have been neutralized or have withdrawn from the system. We are beginning recovery operations for damaged vessels." Nari turned back to face the alien delegates who were still staring at the tactical display in amazement. The red emergency lights had been replaced by normal lighting, but the atmosphere in the chamber had changed completely. "As I was saying, before we were interrupted," Nari said with calm professionalism, "human military doctrine is built around adaptability, individual initiative, and what you might call organized chaos." She gestured toward the viewing window where human ships were already moving to assist their damaged comrades and secure the captured Dominion vessels. "We do not fight the way your computers expect, because real war is not a computer simulation." 3 hours later, the last of the emergency repair crews had finished their work on the station's damaged systems. The meeting chamber looked exactly as it had before the attack, with bright white walls and perfect lighting. But everything had changed for the alien delegates who sat around the circular table. Nari stood once again on the central platform, but now every alien in the room was paying complete attention to her. There were no whispered conversations, no distracted looks at datapads, and no dismissive postures. They had seen human military doctrine in action and finally understood what they had been missing. Lieutenant Kim restored the holographic display system, and the tactical map appeared above the table once more. Instead of showing the Kepler battle from months ago, it displayed the recent engagement that had just ended outside their window. "As I was saying before the Dominion interrupted us," Nari began with a slight smile, "human tactics appear chaotic to computer analysis because we do not follow the same patterns your systems expect." The holographic display showed the positions of human ships at the start of the recent battle. To anyone watching, it had looked like scattered patrol vessels caught off guard by a surprise attack. The reality was very different. Every human ship in this system had been moving to predetermined positions for the past 72 hours, Nari explained. What looked like routine operations was actually deployment for a battle we knew was coming. She touched her data pad, and the display showed ship movements over the previous 3 days. Human vessels had been quietly repositioning themselves while maintaining normal communication traffic and patrol schedules. To outside observers, nothing had seemed unusual. Sergeant Da Yun's intelligence team had intercepted Dominion communications, indicating they were planning a major strike, Nari continued. But instead of reinforcing our defenses in obvious ways, Admiral Lee chose to prepare a trap. The Velkari ambassador leaned forward with his crystal body reflecting the holographic light. "Commander Park, your forces were outnumbered almost 3-1. How could Admiral Lee be confident of victory against such odds?" Nari gestured toward the tactical display, where the battle results were clearly shown. 15 enemy ships destroyed or captured, minimal human casualties, and complete tactical victory in under 2 hours. "Because Admiral Lee does not fight fair," Nari said simply. "Fair fights are what happen when both sides make mistakes. We prefer to win." Lieutenant Kim updated the display to show a new presentation slide that had not been part of Nari's original briefing. The title read, "Human Strategic Principle, Always Fight Tomorrow's War Today." "This attack was not random," Nari explained. "Dominion forces have been studying our tactics since the Kepler engagement. They developed new strategies specifically designed to counter what they learned from that battle." The display showed intelligence reports that Sergeant Yoon's team had gathered over the past month. Dominion training exercises, communication intercepts, and ship movements all pointed to a major change in enemy doctrine. "They expected us to use the same tactics that worked at Kepler," Nari continued. "Scattered attacks, hidden positions, and individual ship initiative. So they planned countermeasures for exactly those strategies." A Karathi military officer spoke up with confusion in her voice. "But Commander, your forces did use those same tactics." The battle we just witnessed followed the same patterns as your Kepler engagement. Nari nodded. On the surface, yes. But Admiral Lee knew the enemy would be prepared for our standard approach. So he prepared something they had never seen before. She touched her datapad again and the holographic display changed to show a detailed breakdown of the recent battle. Instead of the simple tactical overview they had been watching, this showed the true complexity of human operations. What you saw as scattered patrol ships were actually integrated battle groups operating under unified command, Nari explained. Colonel Park's destroyers were not hiding in the debris field by accident. They had been positioned there specifically to counter the Dominion's new anti-stealth protocols. The display showed how human forces had adapted their hiding techniques based on captured enemy technology. Instead of relying on simple sensor shadows, they had used active countermeasures that made their ships appear to be space debris. Commander, Song's fighters did not use the gravity slingshot maneuver from Kepler, Nari continued. Instead, they employed a new technique we call ghost approach. They coasted in with engines completely shut down, using only momentum and course corrections from compressed air thrusters. The alien delegates studied the tactical data with growing amazement. What had looked like familiar human tactics were actually completely new innovations designed to defeat enemies who thought they understood human warfare. Captain Choi's battle group was not positioned behind the fourth moon for a flanking attack, Nari said. They were there to execute a pincer movement that would trap the enemy fleet between multiple firing positions. The holographic display showed how each human ship group had been positioned not just to attack the Dominion fleet, but to prevent their escape. Every possible retreat route had been covered by human vessels waiting in perfect ambush positions. General Nam's boarding operations were not conducted during the battle, Nari explained. They began 3 hours before the Dominion fleet arrived. Alien delegates looked confused until the display showed the truth. Human marine teams had been secretly placed aboard automated cargo vessels that were scheduled to pass through the system during the projected battle time. When the fighting began, our Marines were already inside the battle zone disguised as civilian traffic, Nari continued. They used the cargo ships as mobile assault platforms to attack enemy vessels from point-blank range. The Thaxian military advisor made grinding sounds of amazement. Your Marines were hiding inside fake merchant vessels? Such deception violates several articles of the Galactic Combat Convention. Nari shook her head. The vessels were real cargo ships conducting legitimate business. The Marines were listed as security personnel, which is standard practice for merchant traffic in war zones. Everything was completely legal. She paused and looked around the table at the stunned faces of the alien delegates. The Dominion checked the cargo ship registrations and found exactly what they expected to find. They never looked closer because humans always follow the rules. Admiral Lee's voice came through the communication system as he concluded his post-battle reports. Commander, Park, all hostile vessels have been secured or have withdrawn from the system. We have captured 47 enemy personnel, including 2 ship captains and 1 fleet tactical officer. Nari acknowledged the report before turning back to the alien delegates. The intelligence we gained from this engagement will allow us to anticipate the Dominion's next tactical evolution. By the time they develop new strategies to counter what we did today, we will already be preparing tactics they have not imagined yet. The Velkari ambassador stood up from his chair with his crystal body catching the light. Commander Park, I believe I speak for all the delegates when I say that we have seriously underestimated human military capabilities. Murmurs of agreement came from around the table. The Karathi officers were comparing notes on their datapads, while the Nethians made sounds like controlled electrical storms through their translation boxes. The Galactic Council wishes to formally request that human forces assume primary tactical command for all future operations against the Dominion, the Velkari ambassador continued. What resources do you require from the member species? Nari considered the question carefully before responding. Outside the viewing window, human ships were already beginning recovery operations for both friendly and captured enemy vessels. Admiral Lee was coordinating with his captains to plan the next phase of operations. We need your ships and crews to continue doing what they do best, Nari said. Maintain defensive positions, provide fire support, and hold territory we have captured. but allow human commanders to determine when, where, and how we engage the enemy. She touched her data pad one final time. The holographic display showed a star map of the entire war zone, with human fleet positions marked throughout the region. We have been studying Dominion tactics and strategy since this war began, Nari explained. We know where their next attacks will come from and how they plan to conduct them. With your support, we can end this conflict within 6 months. The alien delegates looked at each other with expressions of hope and determination. For the first time since the war began, they believed victory was possible. What do you need us to do? Nari smiled and gestured toward the viewing window where human ships continued their work with quiet efficiency. Just try to keep up. Admiral Lee's final report crackled through the communication system as repair crews finished their work on the last damaged vessel. All stations, this is Admiral Lee. Stand down from combat alert. Resume normal operations. Well done, everyone. The emergency was over, but everything had changed. The aliens finally understood that humans did not just adapt to war. They made war adapt to them, and that made all the difference. Nari gathered her presentation materials while Lieutenant Kim secured his equipment. The briefing she had planned to give about the Kepler battle had become something much more important.